Hello again, this is Mark with Evo Ballistics. In this short video I'll show you the other important settings that you have to take care of when using the EB Mark 1. We'll start off again on our user interface here on the dashboard. We go to our settings, as the title would suggest, and we see we have 4 additional settings to the position and alignment and trigger and sensitivity of the first video here. So we'll start with the general settings. First things first, here in the top left corner we have the radar settings. Here you can select from a different range of frequencies, all from 24 GHz all the way to 24.25 GHz in 0.05 GHz steps, so always 50 MHz steps. And for each one of these areas, we then have another 10 different channels. This becomes important when using multiple different systems on the same range, so they don't interfere with each other. Each channel always slightly changes the frequency of the radar, so we don't detect the emissions or returns from other systems on the range. We also have the option to increase or rather decrease the signal strength from 100% through 80 to 60%. This is in case you are in a position where you may not want to transmit with the full 100 milliwatts of output signal strength. Instead, you can then switch it to 80 or 60%. This is in most cases not necessary, but just in case you have explosives or similar things that might be sensitive to this, you can reduce the signal strength here. Next up, we have our real-time clock. This, at the moment, as you can see, indicates our current time. If you ever see that this time is off, you can then press the NTP sync button, and the system will first try to connect to the internet to detect a real-time for your location. Or if you do not have an internet connection, it will take the system time from the device that you're connected to. So in this case right now, it will be connected to my laptop and it would check with the system time on the device. Then we have the battery status, which at the moment indicates 74%. Generally, the battery pack of the EB Mark 1 will last you for 6 to 8 hours, so we still have more than enough time here for the rest of the day. Next up, we have our system settings. The first thing here that you can see is the recorded time for a single shot in milliseconds. This is rather important because this indicates how much amount of data will be produced for each shot. You can select everything from 50 milliseconds all the way to 1000 milliseconds. Generally, for most shots, 100 or 200 milliseconds will be more than enough, because we can't track the projectile for that long of a distance. So recording more than we might need is not necessarily and will only produce more data that has to be analyzed, and thus the time for a measurement will be significantly increased. For most cases, 50, 100 or 200 milliseconds will be more than enough. If you're firing something with a very, very slow velocity, let's say a low velocity 40mm grenade, in that case you might want to increase it to 600 or 800 milliseconds because, well, at 80 meters per second and a tracking distance of nearly 100 meters, we would track the projectile for most of its flight path. We then have our multi-shot mode, which can be selected here for the default state. If you want to learn more about the multi-shot mode, we will have a different video on this, but you can see here that you select either the regular multi-shot or the multi-shot plus mode automatically. So whenever you switch, this will be the default version that will be selected, which you then can manually change from again on the dashboard. With the shutdown button, we would simply turn off the EB Mark 1 in the user interface. Next up, we have the system services. Here we have the timeout in seconds. This is the time that the EB Mark 1 will remain in basically in the armed status before automatically disarming again. So we can see that we can select from 20, 40, 60 and unlimited seconds. Generally, I recommend not going to the unlimited tab, because in case the EB Mark 1 for any reason disconnects from your Wi-Fi, for example, you won't notice until you try to manually disarm the system. If you don't take a shot within 60 seconds, usually you wouldn't take the shot anyways. 20 seconds is just in case you want to make sure that you don't have to turn it off manually in case you're not shooting. This is, as you can see here, a very simple way to do this. Next up, we have the recording time for the automatic fire mode in milliseconds. This is something different from the multi-shot or the multi-shot plus mode, because this will record for the full duration and you can take as many shots in that time as you want. Generally, we say you can't take more than 3,000 rounds per minute, but generally it doesn't really matter. Especially if you're using the EB Expert software, even everything over 3,000 rounds per minute is technically possible. Here you can see you can select between 800, 1,600 and 2,400 milliseconds, so between 0.8 all the way to 2.4 seconds. Of course, the longer time you select, the more data will be created, and thus the analysis time will also be increased. The restart button does what you would expect it to do. It will simply restart the EB Mark I, so you have to log in again. Lastly, we see our memory usage here. Generally, we have about 64 gigabytes, or due to the system operating system, only about 59 gigabytes of storage data for shots. We can see that we have already used about 20 gigabytes, but that is for multiple hundreds or even thousands of shots right now. Generally, you won't run out of data here. In case you ever do have that many shots measured, the system will automatically overwrite the raw data of the oldest shots, but will still keep the metadata, so the analysis data of these shots. So you won't ever have the problem of not having enough storage space for enough shots. And now we go to the units and the environment settings here. This is a very simple system here, because you can select for each unit whether you want to use the metric or the imperial system. At the top right corner here, you can see that you can switch every single unit from metric to imperial or vice versa, or we can select the individual units to switch between. At the bottom, you can see the standard environment data, which is always used when you switch to the default environment data in the different modules. You can select this as you like and then press the default button if you want to reset it to these values here. So for example, if I want to have my temperature default not at 15 but at, let's say, 25 degrees, I can simply select that here. I do not have to save this here manually. This is already saved whenever I input it and click somewhere else. And if I want to reset everything, press the default and you're back to the standard. We have already talked about the network settings in this specific video, so we will skip this module here and then go to our OS and update. In this module, you can then update the EB Mark I or unlock additional licenses for modules, which you can see here. First off, in the top left corner, we can see that we are currently running the EB Mark I OS at the 4.05.06 version with the UI 3.04.02 and our web server version. Whenever you have any issues with the EB Mark I or questions regarding use, please always quote us the current version info that you're using on your EB Mark I. When you get the information that we also have a new version available, you can simply press the check button down here, and it will indicate when it has an internet connection if you have a new latest version available. You can see here for the license info that we at the moment have a bunch of modules already active, and some of these modules we currently do not have access to. If I want to have access to a module, you can simply purchase this and get a license key. And if you enter this license key in this tab here and press the activate button, without any additional effort, it will then be activated and you can have access to it without another additional update. And these are the different other settings for the EB Mark I.